Welcome to our channel. Today, we're diving into the life of Gaetano Tommy Lucchese, a founding figure in the American Mafia. Despite standing only 1.62 meters tall, Tommy Lucchese proved that height doesn't matter when you have the talent to wreak havoc. Alongside his brothers, Tommy built a criminal empire feared by victims and envied by other infamous figures. Becoming a US citizen was just a formality that solidified his control over his criminal kingdom. Born on December 1, 1899, in Palermo, Sicily, Tommy, originally Thomas Gaetano Lucchese, was the son of Baldassare and Francesca Lucchese. In 1911, the Lucchese family left the hills of Palermo for the Italian neighborhood of East Harlem, Manhattan, likely seeking better economic opportunities. The family had a history in barbering, with both his father and grandfather working in the trade. However, this traditional occupation no longer provided sufficient income. Like many other Sicilian families of the time, the Luccheses were drawn to New York by the promise of a better future amidst the economic crisis in Italy. Their life in New York was a blend of nostalgia for their homeland and the hope for new opportunities. Gaetano had three brothers, Joseph, Vincent, and Anthony Lucchese, who also followed him into organized crime, albeit with less prominence. All three brothers also followed him into organized crime. Their father made an honest living in New York by transporting cement and occasionally cutting hair. Although Tommy's formal education is unknown, he tried his hand in a machine shop but lost two fingers in an accident in 1915. Undeterred by this misfortune, Tommy quickly immersed himself in the 107th Street gang, where pickpocketing and store robberies were just the beginning of his criminal activities. He operated under the protection of Mafia boss Gaetano Reina, a classic old-school Sicilian mafioso who turned this gang into Tommy's training ground for organized crime. By the 1910s, Reina was head of the Morello crime family. When that organization fell apart, Reina established his own crime family in 1920, ruling over criminal operations in the Bronx and parts of East Harlem. His organization held a monopoly on ice distribution in the Bronx, and Tommy served as his hitman and enforcer. At 18, Tommy showcased his entrepreneurial spirit by starting a window washing business in East Harlem. Of course, his business model included a special protection clause. If someone refused to hire or pay for his services, their windows would end up broken. His cunning knew no bounds. He even operated from a political club, blending business and politics like a true crime visionary of the 1920s. Lucchese consolidated his power and allied with the infamous Charles Lucky Luciano, a move that catapulted him into the upper echelons of organized crime. Early in the decade, Luciano was recruited by Joe Masseria, a major mafia boss at the time. As a soldier for Masseria, Luciano worked with rising gangsters like Vito Genovese and Frank Costello, even before meeting Tommy. Luciano was already building his criminal empire through strategic alliances that would shape the future of organized crime in the United States. Throughout his criminal career, Tommy was only arrested 6 times. His first arrest was in 1920, and his last was 15 years later. Remarkably, he never served a long prison sentence, which only added to his notorious legend. His first arrest took place in Riverhead, Long Island, for grand larceny after stealing a car. During his booking, a police officer, with a jester's sense of humor, compared Lucchese's deformed hand to that of Mordecai Three-Finger Brown, a Major League Baseball pitcher with a similar deformity. This nickname never sat well with Tommy, and for good reason. There is nothing more annoying than a cheap nickname that reminded him of his mutilated hand while he was building a criminal empire. In January of the following year, Tommy was convicted of car theft and sentenced to 3 years and 9 months in prison in March 1922. In a twist worthy of a gangster film, he served only 13 months in Sing Sing Correctional Facility before being paroled in 1923. Tommy Lucchese emerged from prison just in time to capitalize on Prohibition, a 13-year period that banned alcohol in the United States, unleashing a lucrative black market. The Mafia, skilled in the art of bootlegging, established speakeasies and bribed officials to operate without major hitches during this alcohol drought. The Mafia, adept at smuggling, set up secret bars and bribed officials to operate smoothly during the Prohibition era's alcohol drought. Old associates like Lucky Luciano, Frank Costello, and Meyer Lansky partnered with Arnold the Brain Rothstein to amass fortunes selling illegal liquor. Prohibition became a criminal gold mine, with the underworld navigating the law and crime as easily as uncorking clandestine bottles. For Tommy Lucchese, the illegal alcohol trade was highly profitable, enabling him to reinvest in expanding his criminal enterprises into areas like gambling and prostitution. In August 1927, he was temporarily arrested under the alias Thas Sara for receiving stolen goods, but he was not easily caught. In July of the following year, he was arrested alongside his brother-in-law, Joseph Rosato, for the murder of Louis Cerezuolo, but the charges were dropped. Lucchese accumulated arrests like trophies in 1930 for murder, a year later for an investigation against him, and 5 years after that for vagrancy. Each time authorities tried to apprehend him, Lucchese was released quickly, proving to be a tough nut to crack, with charges evaporating like smoke in the air. Despite his short stature, our protagonist proved that even a gangster could have a family like any respectable citizen. At the age of 28, he married Catherine, who was practically a teenage bride at 19 years old. They established their home in Malba, Queens, before moving to a house valued at $1,000 in Lido Beach, Long Island. There, he truly shined, entertaining the elite of the Mafia as if they were lifelong neighbors while maintaining the facade of a successful businessman. Nearly a year after the wedding, Tommy had a son named Baldassare. 3 years later, his daughter Frances was born. Despite these family joys, the 1930s did not start easily for Tommy in his line of work. The Castellammarese War, a bloody fest of betrayals and murders, redefined the landscape of organized crime in the United States in the early 30s. In a scenario worthy of a Shakespearean tragedy, 2 mafia factions, one led by Joe Masseria and the other by Salvatore Maranzano, battled for control of the underworld. Masseria, with his team of old-school Sicilians like Lucky Luciano, Albert Anastasia, Gaetano Reina, and Vito Genovese, represented tradition and conservatism. His faction clung to old customs and the notion that only Italians were worthy of doing business with them. Lucchese, being an associate of Luciano and a member of the Reina family, initially sided with this faction. On the other hand, Maranzano arrived from Castellamare del Golfo with a different proposition, bringing with him emerging figures like Joseph Bonanno and Stefano Magadino. A different proposition emerged, bringing new figures like Joseph Bonanno and Stefano Magadino into the fray. This conflict wasn't just a battle between 2 criminal leaders, but also symbolized a generational clash. The old guard, with their extravagant mustaches and adherence to traditions, faced off against the Young Turks, a new generation of Italian-American mobsters who had no patience for old rules. Led by Luciano, these young, ambitious gangsters wanted to modernize the Mafia and were willing to collaborate with non-Italians to expand their criminal activities. The war kicked off with the murder of Detroit boss Gaspar Milazzo, ordered by Joe Masseria, quickly spiraling into a series of vendettas and betrayals. Gaetano Reina, the infamous capo who led the Reina family, was killed in the Bronx on February 26, 1930, under Masseria's orders. Apparently, Reina had switched sides to join Salvatore Maranzano, becoming a victim of his own ally, proving that loyalty in the criminal world melts away like ice cream in the sun. When Masseria decided to install a puppet, Joseph Pinzolo, to lead the Reina family, Lucchese and his friend Tommy Galliano decided it was time to switch sides. They felt it was embarrassing to be led by Pinzolo, whom they considered an imposed leader, unable to even pronounce cannoli correctly. Mysteriously, Pinzolo was found dead in September 1930 in a room rented months earlier by Lucchese's import business. Following this, Galliano immediately took over the leadership of the family. Some suggest it was a coincidence, but those who knew Lucchese understood that the only kind of coincidence he approved of involved putting a bullet in an enemy's head. Lucchese, with his sharp sense for betrayal, began to court Maranzano. Meanwhile, Luciano and Genovese started to do the same and decided to betray their boss, Joe Masseria. Luciano lured Masseria to a supposed meeting at the Nuova Villa Tamaro restaurant in Coney Island. While playing cards, Luciano excused himself to go to the bathroom, and within minutes, gunmen entered the restaurant and ended Joe Masseria's life. With Masseria out of the way, Maranzano felt secure and began to reorganize the Mafia into what he considered a more efficient structure, dividing it into 5 families, each with its own territory and hierarchy. This reorganization laid the foundation for a more structured and efficient Mafia, but also stirred the ambitions of younger criminals who were not willing to accept Maranzano as the new capo di tutti capi. But here comes another twist. Although Lucchese had ingratiated himself with Maranzano, deep down, he remained loyal to Luciano. When he discovered that Maranzano had hired the hitman Vincent Mad Dog Cole to permanently eliminate Luciano, Lucchese decided to shift his flexible loyalty once more. In an act of mob altruism that could make any film director cry, Lucchese informed Luciano of Maranzano's plan. Thus, in September 1931, Lucky Luciano decided to take the initiative. With the help of Meyer Lansky and Benjamin Bugsy Siegel, Luciano sent 4 Jewish gangsters to Maranzano's office. These assassins, unknown to Maranzano's men, killed him without leaving any survivors. With Maranzano out of the picture and marking the end of the Castellammarese War, Luciano wasted no time reorganizing the criminal world. He created the Mafia Commission, a governing body for organized crime that definitively replaced the old structure of a single boss of all bosses. The structure of a single boss of all bosses was replaced by a new system recognizing 5 criminal families, each with its own territory and activities, with Luciano being the first among equals. By eliminating the capo di tutti capi figure, Luciano ensured that no internal wars would threaten his control again. Thanks to Lucky Luciano's reforms, New York's underworld entered a brief period of peace. Thomas Galliano maintained his position as the leader of one of the 5 families after Luciano's rise in 1932. Galliano decided to keep a very low profile, making it difficult to know about his movements. He preferred to give orders through close allies, particularly Tommy Lucchese, who was his underboss and the most visible face of the Reina family. However, Luciano's dominance on the commission didn't last long. After his conviction for forced prostitution in 1936 and his deportation 10 years later, power struggles within his own crime family and among the five families came to the forefront. Galliano, with his reserved approach, was at a disadvantage in these conflicts, outnumbered on the commission by an alliance of the Bonanno, Magadino, Profaci, and Mangano families. During his years as underboss, Lucchese formed an alliance with Louis Lepke Buchalter, who was one of the brains behind Murder, Inc., a contract-killing service that made competitors look like amateurs. Lepke handled extortions and murders as easily as others manage a fast food menu. Lepke and Lucchese controlled many of the largest local unions in the International Ladies Garment Workers Union in the Garment District. The Reina family also dominated unions in the trucking, construction, and food industries and held undisclosed ownership interests in several Manhattan nightclubs. Lucchese understood that to truly dominate, one needed to be not only strong, but also intelligent and strategic. While operating from the shadows, Tommy ensured that the family's operations continued smoothly, becoming a figure who occasionally overshadowed the boss without contradicting him. In the shadows, Tommy ensured the family's operations ran smoothly, often outshining the boss without contradicting him. He skillfully navigated the complexities of immigration, becoming a U.S. citizen on January 25, 1943, in Newark, New Jersey. This new status allowed him to conceal his criminal past like a magician hiding a marked card. Tommy also attended the infamous Havana Conference in 1946, organized by the cunning Charles Lucky Luciano. This event was akin to a supervillain convention, where mobsters from across the United States gathered to plan their next big moves without stepping on each other's toes. In Havana, these crime lords fortified their empires and prepared for a golden age of illegal activities. Among the notable attendees was Tommy Lucchese, the underboss of the Reina crime family. Ever the opportunist, Tommy was there to ensure his family's interests were well represented and to find new, lucrative avenues for their operations. While the specifics of Tommy's contributions to the conference remain undocumented, his presence alone speaks volumes about his significance in the Mafia's power structure at that time. Meanwhile, Galliano, the boss of the family, spent his later years in a kind of golden retirement in Long Island. He passed away on February 16, 1951, from arteriosclerotic heart disease. His exact age at death is uncertain, with some even suggesting he might have died earlier. Before he passed, Galliano entrusted the daily management of his empire to his loyal underboss, Tommy Lucchese. In an ultimate act of loyalty and pragmatism, Tommy took the reins without hesitation, becoming the new head of the family. In a seamless blend of supreme loyalty and sheer pragmatism, Tommy Lucchese took over the reins of power without hesitation, becoming the new boss. During the Senate hearings on organized crime that year, it was confirmed with a mix of sadness and ambition that his former superior had passed away. Such was the influence of the new leader that the family quickly adopted his name, becoming the Lucchese crime family. Wasting no time in consolidating his power, Tommy appointed loyal mobsters like Stefano LaSalle as his right-hand man and Vincenzo Rao as his consigliere. That same year, Lucchese forged a network of alliances with Vito Genovese of the Luciano family and Carlo Gambino of the Anastasia family. Together, they had a long-term vision of nothing less than absolute control over the commission. Tommy didn't limit his influence to the underworld. He cultivated close friendships with prominent New York politicians, understanding that true power is forged in the shadows of both political and criminal spheres. Among the notable figures absorbed by the capo were Democratic mayors of New York, William O'Dwyer and Vincent Impellitteri, as well as several members of the judiciary who assisted the family on numerous occasions. His ideological triangle was simple, yet effective: money, a low profile, and evasion of the law. The Lucchese family not only took control of the garment district and transportation in Manhattan, but also mastered the art of union manipulation and bending rules without breaking them. In the 1950s, Lucchese and his southern counterpart, Santo Trafficante Jr., wove a drug trafficking network that would make any modern drug lord blush. Trafficante Jr., meticulously trained in the dark rituals of the Mafia by his father, maintained a strong and frequent relationship with Tommy in the clandestine parlors of the Big Apple. In 1952, when Attorney General James McGranary initiated a denaturalization process against Lucchese, Tommy must have smiled behind his shiny glasses. The government claimed that Lucchese had not disclosed all his arrest records when he applied for citizenship in 1943. Between 1943 and 1957, Tommy and his associates decided it was time to shake up the organized crime hierarchy. Their plan was to target the leaders of the Luciano and Anastasia crime families to seize control of the powerful commission. The action began on May 2nd, when Frank Costello's routine was dramatically interrupted. After a peaceful dinner, he was returning to his luxurious apartment in Central Park West when a black Cadillac pulled up behind his taxi. Vincent, the Chin Gigante, a large man with ill intentions, emerged from the car. With the subtlety of a bull in a china shop, Gigante followed Costello into the lobby and shot him in the head without uttering a word. Miraculously, the bullet only grazed Costello's skull, leaving a superficial wound. Gigante fled the scene immediately. Rushed to Roosevelt Hospital, Costello was treated for what seemed like a more severe injury than it actually was. When questioned by the police, Costello, adhering to the code of silence, claimed he neither saw nor heard anything. Without Costello's cooperation, Gigante was acquitted and went on to become the boss of the Genovese family. Later that year, Albert Anastasia decided to start his day with a shave at the Park Sheraton Hotel's barbershop in New York. As he relaxed in the barber's chair, two men with handkerchiefs over their faces burst in, resembling a scene from an action movie. They pushed the barber aside and opened fire on Anastasia. In a twist of irony, Anastasia lunged at his attackers, but ended up attacking their reflections in the mirror. The gunman continued to shoot until a dazed and severely wounded Anastasia fell dead on the barbershop floor. Initial theories suggested that Vito Genovese and Carlo Gambino orchestrated the hit, while Joe Gallo's crew claimed responsibility for the execution. Despite the rampant speculation, no one was definitively prosecuted for Anastasia's murder. Carlo Gambino, the underboss of the organization, assumed leadership after Anastasia's death. Feeling invincible, Vito Genovese called for a national mafia meeting to legitimize his control over the Luciano family. The meeting, initially contested in location, ended up at mobster Joseph Barbara's country estate in Apalachin, New York. Just weeks before the year's end, the New York State Police raided the meeting, arresting dozens of gangsters as they fled like rats from a sinking ship. Luckily, Tommy Lucchese had not yet arrived, sparing him the embarrassment of being detained. However, his consigliere, Vincenzo Rao, along with other leaders like Gambino and Genovese, were not as fortunate. The public humiliation of Genovese provided the perfect catalyst for a new alliance between Luciano, Costello, Lansky, Gambino, and of course, Tommy Lucchese. These 5 venomous cobras decided that Genovese had to be eliminated. 2 years later, with the help of his new friends, Genovese was arrested on narcotics trafficking charges and sent to prison, where he eventually died in 1969. Gambino emerged as the puppet master, pulling strings with unparalleled cunning. With Genovese out of the picture, the power dynamics within the commission shifted in favor of Lucchese and his associates. Meanwhile, Tommy relished his victory with a mix of cynicism and satisfaction. In April of the following year, the U.S. Supreme Court overturned his 1952 denaturalization based on a legal technicality. But the very next day, Attorney General William Rogers, determined to make life difficult for Lucchese, initiated a new case against him. To further solidify their pact, in 1961, the marriage between Thomas Gambino, Carlo Gambino's son, and Frances Lucchese, Tommy Lucchese's daughter, was not just a celebration of love, but a consolidation of power between criminal dynasties. As over 1,000 guests enjoyed the feast and toasts, Carlo presented Tommy with a generous gift of $30,000. This gesture not only solidified their family union, but also ensured the expansion of their dominion at John F. Kennedy Airport. Tommy, skilled in the art of union extortion and security control, managed the strings of power with the same efficiency he used to oversee incoming and outgoing flights. Meanwhile, Gambino enjoyed an increasingly dominant position within the commission and in the dark alleys of organized crime in New York. Together, they formed an unstoppable duo where mafia laws surpassed any legal or moral obstacles. Just a year later, Joseph Bonanno, with his eternal optimism and hunger for power, decided it was time to revolutionize the Mafia Commission and take the reins alongside his loyal accomplice, Joseph Magliocco, the newly inaugurated boss of the Profaci family. They concocted a plan that promised to be as bold as it was disastrous. The plan was simple: eliminate the heads of the Gambino, Lucchese, and Magaddino crime families, along with Frank De Simone. Because, of course, what could go wrong when you decide to kill the most powerful leaders in the crime world? With everything planned, Magliocco assigned the dirty task to his trusted hitman, Joseph Colombo. But here's where the plot twists. Realizing the golden opportunity for his own career, Colombo decided to reveal the plot to the intended victims, Gambino and our central protagonist, neither of whom were exactly naive. They quickly realized that Magliocco could not have devised such an ambitious plan alone, and considering how close Bonanno was to Magliocco, as well as their family ties, Gambino and Lucchese concluded that Bonanno was the mastermind behind the plan. The commission, still in shock, summoned Bonanno and Magliocco to explain this disastrous coup attempt. Bonanno, in a reckless and revealing move, fled to Montreal, leaving Magliocco to face the commission's wrath alone. Sick and frightened, Magliocco did the only sensible thing. He confessed his role in the plot. In an unconventional act of mercy, the commission spared his life but forced him to retire as the boss of the Prohibition family and imposed a modest fine of $50,000. As a reward for his opportunistic loyalty, Colombo was given the leadership of the Prohibition family. However, such power did not last long for him. In 1965, Tommy was admitted to Columbia Presbyterian Hospital for surgery on an inoperable brain tumor. The doctors did their best, but the prognosis was grim. They gave him between 3 and 6 months to live. Despite his cardiac issues, Tommy spent a considerable amount of time in the hospital receiving multiple treatments and therapies. Even though he was practically confined to his hospital bed, Tommy never stopped leading his crime family. The following year, the police mistakenly raided a meeting of Mafia leaders in Queens, thinking they were selecting a successor for the ailing Lucchese. But no, the sick man was still in command and had no intention of stepping down. Defying all medical expectations and despite his deteriorating health, Lucchese lived for nearly 2 more years after his surgery. On July 13, 1967, at the age of 67, he finally passed away in his home in Lido Beach, Long Island. It was more than the end of a criminal life. It was a spectacle of power and presence. The funeral was a grand production with over 1,000 attendees, including politicians, judges, police officers, and of course, other mobsters. It resembled an Oscars gala, more than a farewell to a crime boss. All attendees paid their respects under the watchful eyes of undercover police officers who, like paparazzi of the underworld, immortalized the event with their cameras. However, when the Mafia throne becomes a game of musical chairs, who needs principles when you can have an interim boss? Lucchese's preferred candidates to succeed him as the family head were all either imprisoned or attending court hearings. Such was the case with Anthony Corallo, Hector Coco, and Vincenzo Rao. In desperation, the commission chose Carmine Tramonti to occupy the seat until Anthony Corallo was released from prison. And that wraps up the incredible life and legacy of Tommy Lucchese. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe, like, hit the bell icon for notifications, and share it with your friends. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more captivating stories from the world of organized crime.